I am white, which means I'm evil. It's funny though, I don't feel evil, but if liberal news media says I'm evil, I guess it must be true. According to MSNBC, here are 5 things white people like me never have to worry about. Number 1, enjoying inherent advantages. The term white privilege refers to systemic advantages that white individuals often unconsciously benefit from in daily life. Advantages not shared by people of color in the same context. If it's unconscious bias, unconscious privilege, then how do I consciously change something that is subconscious? So this article pulls on White Privilege Unpacking the Visible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh. I remember having to read this white privilege essay in college, or as I like to refer to it as the indoctrination factory. It should be noted that Peggy, the author, was an affluent white woman who confused privilege with class. See, it's not about race, it's about class. Upper, middle, lower. Middle and upper are always going to have more advantages than the lower class. Look at Colin Kaepernick. This douchebag was adopted by white parents and raised upper class. He's not white, but enjoyed upper class lifestyles, and he eventually made millions of dollars in the NFL as a black man. I love this quote. If you're a 45-year-old white person struggling to hold down 2 minimum wage jobs so you can feed your partner and kids and keep a roof over their heads, nothing could be more guaranteed to make you vote for Donald Trump than being told you're privileged by a privately educated upper-class socialist with a PhD in gender studies.
My neighborhood really was just poor black and poor white. And so I hear a lot about white privilege, and I'm like, fuck, man, missed that. And my black friends will get mad at me, man. Like, man, look what you did to us, man. Look what you did to us. Like, bro, do you think I would do all that shit and move right next door, bro?
Number 2, white comfort in predominantly white spaces. I like the old lady's hand on the ass. This hijab lady's got a big old butt. One key aspect discussed is the ability of white individuals to predominantly surround themselves with people of their race, providing a comfort in social settings that might not be as easily accessible to people of color. This is not white privilege. This is the privilege of any group of people with a shared culture or identity. We can look at this through the lens of cultural assimilation or acculturation. When an immigrant is assimilated into the culture of another country, they tend to wear the clothing and adopt the culture of the country that is hosting them. Acculturation is where you create micro-communities like your Chinatowns, Mexican shops, Persian, Indian communities, you name it. Humans find comfort in familiarity. So it's really not uncommon for immigrants to group together because they have a shared cultural background. Now, a lot of the lefties say you shouldn't assimilate because you'll lose your cultural identity and your heritage. I lived in Africa for 2 years. I didn't become less American. I just embraced a different culture, a different language, a different way of life.
Emos. Just beat it. Beat it. Não? Agora eu vou ter medo.
I'm proud of my American culture. I didn't lose any of that. And everyone should be able to celebrate their culture. Except whites. Remember, we're evil. Something about acculturation is that it should be a two-way process. Both cultures should be changed. Maybe a Mexican restaurant features a hamburger on the menu and has the menu in both English and Spanish. Both cultures are being shared. The problem comes when a new culture immigrates into a country and refuses to acculturate. For example, I was getting my haircut one time and a Hispanic mother walked in with her kid and pointed to his head and then made the scissor motions with her hand. It was just plain lazy. I lived in Africa. I had to learn Portuguese and Creole. My brother lived in Russia. He had to learn Russian. We both learned the language of the country that hosted us. How hard is it to Google Translate haircut before you walk into a barber shop? Americans' resistance, especially to illegal immigration, is less about allowing people into the country and more about allowing people into the country that have entered illegally and refuse to adopt to the culture and the language and the way of life in America. Embrace your culture, but give respect to the American culture that you are entering. Number 3, earning less. The median weekly earnings for Black workers aged 16 and older stand at $878, which is lower than the national average of $1,059 for all U.S. workers in the same age bracket. Can you take one wild guess why the Black population makes less than the white population? Because the Black unemployment rate has consistently been twice as high as the unemployment rate among white people. It said there is no other relationship in the labor market that is nearly this consistent and stable since 1972. Isn't it obvious? If you're unemployed, you're not making the wages to make your national average as high as the white population. Technically, if the Black population has twice as much unemployment, they should be making $500 to every $1,000 of the white population. So $800 is pretty good for that rate of unemployment. Now, of course, liberals are going to say it's discrimination. They're just not being hired as much. There's a difference between discrimination in hiring and people too lazy to want to work. In fact, Black people have a noted advantage through affirmative action and diversity hiring. Riddle me this: if companies really only cared about your skill and talents and background and ability to do the job, then why do they still ask for race on the job application process? My older brother has a PhD. He was a scientist at a company that must not be named. They wanted to do a photo shoot with all of the engineers releasing this new software. What this company did was they hired actors, an Indian, a Black person, an Asian, men, women. I don't know, maybe there's a transgender in there. But for the photo op, they pretended to have this big, diverse group of engineers when in reality, it was a bunch of white guys. Because it's all for optics. Companies should want workers that can perform the job duties the best, not the ones that make them look the most racially diverse. A fairly recent example of white people basically kowtowing and bowing down to Black people is when Mike Henry, who was the voice of Cleveland Brown on Family Guy, quit after 20 years. Henry stated he believed it was wrong for a white actor to voice a Black actor and that persons of color should play characters of color. Now, I'm not saying that Black people are lazy or they shouldn't get jobs. So I worked at a furniture warehouse with 2 Black guys and they were cousins. One was a really hard worker, kept to himself, great team player. The other Black guy was from the hood. He was an aspiring rapper. He never wanted to work. Now, the hardworking Black guy would always comment, "Man, this N-word can never hold down a job. Just wait." And I didn't have to wait long because he lasted for about 2 weeks. One day, this wannabe rapper was hiding out in the warehouse when he should have been helping us unload some trucks. And he was looking through an auto trader, looking at cars. Because you know, at that sweet $10 an hour, you're going to get that Cadillac with the chrome rims. Anyway, our white manager walked in, grabbed the magazine out of his hands, and he just tore it up, like super pissed off. Anyway, the wannabe rapper didn't take too kindly to that, and he quit the same day. Basically, what I'm saying is they both had an equal opportunity to work. One took advantage of it while the other threw it away. 4, being wrongfully convicted because of color. A study titled Race and Wrongful Convictions in the United States sheds alarming light on the influence of radical disparities in the judicial system. If we're looking at arrests and convictions, it's all about volume. And statistically speaking, there's just more Black people committing crimes. So you've probably heard the statistic that 14% of the population is Black, but they make up over 60% of the crimes. These numbers come from the FBI, from the Crime in the U.S. 2019, which is 5 years old, but it is the most recent full report. It breaks down arrests by race and ethnicity. According to the census in 2019, there are 328 million people in America, 197 million or 60% white, and 48 million or 14% Black. That is why it is so concerning to see that 51% of murders were committed by 14% of the population. I will say, though, that white people have black people beat in DUIs, liquor laws, and drunkenness. Again, this is about culture, not color. If we dive deeper into the murder statistics, we see that more white people kill white people, more black people kill black people. But you can also see that more black people have killed white people than white people have killed black people. If we go back to culture, we also see an absence of black fathers. Between 2016 and 2020, up to 80% of black minors were raised in a single mother home, compared to only 30% in white families. The overwhelming absence of fathers in the black community could be a major determining factor in the amount of crime within the black community. Social scientists have long spoken about the benefits for children who live in two-parent homes, including economic, educational, health, and other advantages. To me, the evidence is clear. If you want less crime in your community, have a stronger family. Number 5, white people cannot be victims of hate crimes. Well, yeah, no duh. When you can only charge white people with hate crimes, of course they're going to be the only perpetrators. Since 1968, when Congress passed and President Lyndon Johnson signed into law the first federal hate crime statute, the DOJ has been enforcing federal hate crime laws. There's a recent news story about a group of female college basketball players that had the N-word yelled at them by a car driving by. So Tony Stewart, the director of the task force, said, "I want to make it very clear and very loud that we condemn in the strongest terms these horrendous acts of hatred. And if the perpetrators can be found, we will call upon them to be prosecuted." According to the hate crime statute, a hate crime is only committed when physical damage or destruction of property of the victim or person has happened. A hate crime is also when there's reasonable fear of harm to this person or property. I don't think some dipshit revving their engine and yelling the N-word is a hate crime. I think they're dumbasses, but they shouldn't go to jail. If you want to see a real hate crime that wasn't labeled a hate crime, check out Cedric Moore, who sucker punched a 12-year-old white kid on the street. Now, he was sentenced to 7 years, but he didn't get any kind of penalty for a hate crime.
The man they were looking for there, Cedric Moore, has turned himself in. He did that yesterday afternoon. This is the video here, and warning, it is graphic. Police say the 12-year-old boy was dancing here with a few friends when the SUV pulled up and this guy just hits him. Moore gets back in the car and takes off. Now, the boy's mother actually tells us he suffered a concussion and he is recovering.
You better believe if this was some big white guy with a flannel shirt and a mega hat knocking out a 12-year-old black kid, he'd be put away for 50 years. Now, are you ready for a staggering statistic? White people are going to become the minority in America by 2045. 64% of Americans identified as white in 2010. In 2020, 58%. To put it in perspective, in 1980, 80% of Americans identified as white, and now it's only 58%. The white population is older than these other groups. We're aging faster. We have a lower birth rate and increased number of deaths. Also, with immigration blowing up and out of control, there's also a lot of newlyweds who are marrying someone of another race and creating multiracial, multi-ethnic babies. By 2045, us white people, we're going to be the minorities. Ooh, I can't wait. Are we going to get affirmative action? At the end of the day, America is a melting pot of cultures, of races, of ethnicities. And as we marry more into these other cultures and embrace them, the delineation is not going to be as clear between races anymore. Starting now and in the future, we should identify as our culture and not our color. I'm a conservative Christian who values family, freedom, and country. Judge me on what I choose and what I can control. Not something out of my control like my skin color. I am white, but I'm not evil. And if being a minority is what makes you good, then just you wait till 2045 when we can take the crown. Anyway, leave a comment down below. Is it okay to be proud of your white culture? This video was a little longer than usual. Thanks for sticking around, and be sure to subscribe to Conservative Vibes. See you next time.